Dear all, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the event today. I would like to wish everyone a very happy International Women's Day. The day offers us the opportunity to celebrate accomplishments and progress made, but also to acknowledge how much more needs to be done. IRENA analytical work on gender over the past years has made clear that the renewable energy sector already fares better in providing opportunities to women than the fossil fuel industry. But to fully achieve a just and inclusive future, we need to step up our efforts and pave the way for women to have an equal say in shaping this future. And renewable-based energy transition is a vehicle for inclusion, accelerating the shift toward a renewable, distributed, and decarbonized energy system contribute to inclusive economies, where women have better access to opportunities and a greater influence on decisions that affect them. It must be led by example to make the gender agenda an integral part of the energy agenda. Let me thank for this all women who are promoting the energy transition and community energy up to the larger corporation. At IRENA, I have made gender equality our priority since I took office. And we have now reached gender parity in our senior management team. I believe that we'll reach our common goal only if the fight for gender parity becomes everyone's priority. While this must be done a daily effort, we need an opportunity today to reflect and prioritize our common actions. I'm looking forward to listen to all the insight my colleagues and our guests will be offering at this event. And with this, it's my pleasure to give the floor to our Director of Planning and Program Support, Elizabeth Press, to open the event. Thank you all joining us today. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Director General, and thank you, Rabia and colleagues for inviting me to this meeting. It is really a pleasure to be in the gender event in the energy context, and I want to take this opportunity to reflect briefly how we as an institution got to this point, that we are able to have a substantive, empirical, qualitative and quantitative knowledge to share with you. So this is in part actually reflecting the gender diversity in the agency, because Rabia has made this part of the programmatic agenda even from 2013, which was a couple of years into establishment of the agency. And our first ever report on renewable energy jobs had a chapter on women's employment. And we kept this issue alive through our successive renewable energy and job reviews, which come out, as many of you know, on an annual basis. And so gradually, we were gaining knowledge on what is happening in the sector and the renewable sector in particular. And in 2016, we did an initial survey to try to quantify the women's share in the renewable sector. And gradually, we extended that to a more granular level and considered the certain regions. For instance, in 2017, we looked at the MENA region. And finally, in 2019, we did the flagship report on renewable energy and gender perspective. And this was actually a really interesting undertaking. And I know that some of the people on this call who will participate in the meeting played a role in making this a global effort, when we all joined forces and had this global survey of employers, companies, and institutions to try to gather empirical evidence to understand, what is happening in the sector, whether the areas that kind of differ from the general trends in gender and economy, and it certainly has shown that there are specific issues related to this. The key result was that women in the renewable sectors accounted for 32% of the workforce. And obviously that was better than the oil and gas sector, where traditionally you have a 21% of women accounting in that sector. But still, it really is a lot worse than what we see in the global economy as a whole, which accounts for about 44% of women globally. You know, I was listening this morning, and quite a few women were making statements, obviously, on Women's Day. And the EU Commissioner said this morning, like, there is no such thing as jobs for men and jobs for women. And I think this is one of the things that we really need to fix in the energy sector, because until now it was actually very much considered a men's job. And I think with renewable energy and the renewables-based energy transition, we are changing this picture. But we really have a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that the energy system of the 21st century includes this discussion, gender dimension in this discussion, because it's the only way that we can make a difference. So I will stop here and hand over to my colleague Rabia Faruqi, who is Director of Knowledge, Policy and Finance at IRENA. She's also as I said, the brain behind the work on gender. She's our gender focal point, and a dedicated woman who has been a trailblazer throughout her career, started with oil and gas, and now obviously with us fighting the fight in the renewable sector. Thank you so very much, and Rabia, over to you.
Thank you so much, dear Elizabeth. Very kind words from you. Thank you, Director General, for the introductory remarks. So I'm really happy to be here and provide some insights. I mean, every now and then I'm going to take the liberty of putting some personal experiences in this presentation. Because I think it quite nicely illustrates some of the trends that we have seen over the past few decades. So what I think the IRENA can be proud about is the fact that we have showcased really with solid qualitative and quantitative analysis that the transformative changes that we're witnessing in the energy sector towards more renewables, distributed, decarbonized systems really can generate and has generated socioeconomic benefits, including, of course, the creation of jobs across different segments of the renewable energy value chain. Now, for close to a decade now, as Elizabeth mentioned, IRENA has filled an important knowledge gap by analyzing global employment in renewables, covering methodology issues, discussing policies in support of job creation, assessing skills and training required, and of course, exploring the gender aspects. So the last annual review on jobs provides a global number of 11.5 million. This is about 20% of the workforce overall in the overall energy sector. And 3.8 million of those are in the PV industries. We estimate that the total renewables number by 2050 could be around 42 million by 2050, yeah. And we have very conservative estimates, so I would think that it's higher than that. But now, to ensure that the transformation is just and inclusive, we need to take a closer look at gender. And we're celebrating today Women's Day, and we represent about half of humanity, but as Elizabeth mentioned, in this male-dominated energy sector, women are still not, there's still no equity from that perspective. And just to give you a personal experience, close to 3 decades ago, when I started my career as an energy economist in the conventional energy sector, I was more often than not the only woman in meetings and conferences and when people didn't know who I was, very often they asked me to book a taxi or confirm their flights, and it seemed just obvious to men that I was a secretary to assist. So I think we've come a long way. Of course, it's many decades ago, but there's still a long way to go. So Elizabeth kindly showed the numbers. We're 32% of the renewables workforce. but still below the sort of overall share in the overall economy. Of course, better than the conventional sector. So the other good news is that we also know from our work that opportunities for jobs in the domestic value creation can be generated along the value chain of renewable projects. So in IRENA series, Leveraging Local Capacity, we assess the types of jobs created along each segment of the value chain. And this provides policymakers with an understanding of the human resources and skills required to prepare for the energy transition in terms of production, installation, and operation of facilities for renewables technology. So for instance, a 50 megawatt PV project provides 230,000 person days from planning all the way to decommissioning. The highest concentration is operation and maintenance, about 55–56%, followed by manufacturing over 20%, and construction and installation 17%. Now, what is interesting is that if you look at occupational patterns, you can see on the slide that the deployment of solar PV offers different employment perspectives for people from a wide range of experiences, skills, backgrounds. And this includes individuals with training in STEM fields, around 30%, and non-STEM highly qualified jobs, and in administrative positions, but also a large share of lower skills employment, such as construction and factory work, which could be leveraged from different industries with minimum training. And those are about 60% of the occupations. Now, of course, those profiles for most of these kinds of jobs are typically favor men. For jobs where women fare better, such as in administration, the survey shows that about 45% are filled by women, but there is a small share of the total jobs. For STEM and non-STEM professional occupations, women's participation is much lower than men, about 30% share for both STEM and non-STEM professional occupation. This means that, like in many other economic sectors, women still encounter numerous barriers, and IRENA survey results differentiates both barriers to entry and barriers to retention and advancement of women in the workforce. And this in both contexts, in the context of access, energy access, and non-access or modern. Now, regarding the barriers to entry, perceptions of gender roles are seen as the most important barrier. And these are driven by obviously cultural. Many of the fundamental decisions that people make. Second is the lack of adequate awareness of both STEM and non-STEM careers in renewable energy. Then there is the difficulty in accessing professional and personal networks that are critical to enter many professions. I can assure you that these networks just a few years ago were really men's clubs. And according to, that was very interesting, to HR interviews we had, head of HRs that we carried out, social media was instrumental in breaking some of these silos that we saw in the conventional energy sector. Now, when it comes to barriers to retention and advancement, obviously the survey found that the glass ceiling is the most important one. In almost half of the participating private sector firms, men represent at least 75% of board members. And of course, then you have barriers like mobility requirements, difficult work hours, lack of supporting work environment, etc. But the one interesting finding was that also that was highlighted was the pay gap, which continues to prevail. So around 70% of women participating in the survey indicated that both genders are not paid equally for the same kind of job still. Now, if we look at the barriers and opportunities along the value chain in the access context, again, women face some challenges. The survey that we have shows that the most commonly cited barriers is, again, cultural and social norm. norms. That's followed by lack of gender-sensitive policies, training opportunities, and very importantly, in the access context, inequity in asset ownership. So here again, there are plenty of opportunities for women to participate, given the decentralized nature of renewables application, which really brings energy choices to the household and community level, where women tend to have a greater voice. So you can read a lot of examples in the reports that we have on the opportunities for engagement that bring important improvements also in women's self-perception and empowerment within the community, like Barefoot College, Solar Sister, etc. Now, to advance gender equality, we need to take measures and policies. And I will just give you a few examples and again, leave you the pleasure to download our publications, which are all for free on our website, where you can see best practice and case studies in IRENA's reports. But first is mainstreaming gender at all levels, both in access and non-access contexts, gathering and reporting of gender disaggregated data is crucial. Conducting gender audits and awareness training is important. Again, on a personal note, mainstreaming is at every level. I'd like to mention that when I started the gender work at IRENA many years ago, as Elizabeth mentioned, it was really, for some people, perceived as not such a relevant exercise by a feminist, both among even some colleagues, including women. And today it has been really mainstreamed in the work program, as Elizabeth mentioned, as an important dimension of the energy transition, fully backed by our leadership. So another important type of measure that is needed to tailor training and skills is needed to tailor, training and skills development in STEM and non-STEM business and leadership subjects. So there are many practices like adjusting curricula, making sure that you have a certain number of women in certain fields at the educational level, ensuring better access to education and training overall, especially I would say in the energy context. A third type of measure is how to attract and retain talent in the sector through policies. And I personally am very much for gender targets and quotas to address workplace imbalances, as well as for practices that around fair and transparent decision-making and equal pay. And we've seen there are many examples, like but mandatory quotas for corporate boardrooms, for example, like in France, Germany, Norway, have achieved much higher shares of women than those with voluntary measures. Or, for example, in Australia, there was a very nice case of raising women's salary in 2018 to achieve pay parity with men. And so I can't remember how much it was, but it was quite an investment to come to equity or parity. In the access context, maybe the one thing to highlight is ensuring access to finance and markets. And that's really key. And there are some programs providing loans for women in off-grid communities, but there's a lot more that can be done. And most importantly, but also probably most difficult, is the need to challenge and break cultural and social norms to strengthen the visibility of women in the energy transition further. And of course, we're doing much better than the rest in terms of renewables, but more can be done. And as we all know, even if some of the explicit is dealt with through certain measure, there is a whole underlying or implicit perception and judgment on women and women's role that really needs to be further worked on. So in conclusion, maybe I just like to say that advancing equality and diversity proposition rather than a zero-sum game, establishing gender, as mentioned by our Director General, as a pillar of energy strategies at the national and global levels, but also, of course, within institutions and companies, will produce a swifter and more inclusive transition to renewable energy while accelerating the attainment of multiple SDGs. This is especially critical nowadays because of the global health crisis, obviously. I would also like to mention that later today, we will be launching the Global Gender Survey for the solar PV sector to track women's presence across the value chain of the solar PV industry. The results will serve as the basis for this third report that we will do in the series of gender perspective. So I would like to encourage you all to participate. And I would like to also thank two members of my team who are leading this work. It's Celia and Michael. And thank you very much for your great support and hard work. So again, thank you. And before finishing, I'd like to give the floor to my friend Christine. Christine is the Executive Director of the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, GWNet, of which I'm also happy to be part of. So Christine Lins has kindly accepted to moderate a great panel of experts on women leading the way in solar energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for this panel discussion on gender equality for an inclusive energy transition, women leading the way in solar energy. I'm really excited to be here with you today and also to be with an excellent panel. I'm going to introduce to start with the panelists. So it's my pleasure to welcome Nawal Al-Hosani, the UAE's permanent representative to the International Renewable Energy Agency, Walburga Hemmetsberger, the CEO of Solar Power Europe, Monica Oliphant, who is the past president of ICES and has a long-standing career in the solar field, Silvia Piana, who is the head of regulatory affairs for Africa, Asia, and Oceania at Enel, and member of the Coalition for Action steering group. Mrs. Habiba Ali, founder and managing director and CEO of Solar Renewable Energies. Carol Weiss, co-founder of Remote Energy, and Virginia Schneider from the Inter-American Development Bank. You already see that we have a packed panel, and we are trying to answer lots of questions in this a bit less than an hour. So I'm asking everybody to put on their cameras and to join me for this discussion. As there was some issues with time, I will start with Habiba Ali. Habiba is the managing director and CEO of Solar Renewable Energies, one of the largest distributors of renewable energy in Nigeria. And I was wondering, Habiba, in your perspective, what you think are the challenges for women in the access context to become leaders, and whether there are any obstacles they face that are different from women in solar PV or in other renewables than in other sectors, for example.
Thank you very much, Christine, and it's an honor to be on this panel. And yeah, according to what you're saying about if there are any opportunities for women in this sector, and I'll speak from experience mostly because I've been in the business for about 10 years now, or upwards of 15 years actually.
So we've lost your image now, hopefully only the image and not the sound. Are you still with us? Or there was maybe some connection issue, so we will just quickly check whether Habiba comes back immediately. Indeed, Rabia has alluded to in her presentation, IRENA shares lots of insights of challenges for women presented both in the on-grid and also in the off-grid sector. But we were thinking that Habiba can share her insights. I think there might be some connectivity issues, and maybe the internet was down in Nigeria. So I think we should not lose any time and immediately go on with our discussion. I would like to turn to Nawal Al-Husani. the UAE is greatly leveraging their solar resources, and you have lots of projects, and also the UAE has a large number of women graduating from engineering programs. So I was wondering whether you can give us some insights how your country is encouraging all these women to join STEM careers, and whether you have any sense how many of these women are then joining the renewable sector and specifically the solar PV workforce.
Thank you very much, Christine. It's so nice to see you and see all those phenomenal women around this panel. I am very grateful and honored to be part of this panel, and I thank IRENA and IRENA's DJ and team for organizing such an important session. To be honest, the UAE has been leading and empowering women since the beginning of establishment of the country. I don't know if a lot of people maybe are aware, but the UAE is a very young country. It's I'm actually 1 year older than my country, so it's a very young country. And the UAE, I'm very proud to say that on the first 5 years of creating the country, the Women Union was created. So having this focus on creating and empowering and engaging women from the very beginning, when the country was created, is paying off as we see today. To your point, we have since your university was established, the majority of graduates were females, and we never had an issue of providing enough engineers or enough graduates from the STEM education. The UAE has been leading when it comes to women graduates in that sector. Equally in the UAE or outside the UAE, because we do send a lot of our young talent abroad to study. So, we have been building our national talent from day one. I think reflecting on what Rabia just mentioned about the barriers that stops women from accelerating is reflective of the approach of the strategy that the UAE has taken to engage and empower women. Empowering women is about giving them the choice, making sure that they are choosing what they want to do and being able to pursue the careers that they want to do, and breaking any barrier in that field. So systematically, the UAE has followed a very systematic approach in that, providing equal access to education from day one. And even when cultural norms stopped education for both men and women. So, culturally, the very early days of the union, families were not comfortable with their children going to schools because they were part of the bread earners and support of the family. And His Highness Sheikh Zayed, God bless his soul, himself was going from house to house with Sheikh Fatma to encourage families to send at least 2 of their kids, boys and girls, into the school. So from day one, even when culturally education was still not that much of a norm in the UAE, that equal access to education has been provided, and equal access to training has been provided. So once the UAE started pursuing this drive for accelerating renewable energy in the UAE and abroad, all the opportunities and the platforms has been facilitated and opened for both men and women equally. So, I never in my career went into a job interview when I felt that, I'm going to be discriminated against because I'm a female. Just like Rabia, actually, feeling that you are, you are a bit awkward and the only woman in a meeting only happened to me when I traveled abroad rather than here in the UAE. So a few years back, when I was in Masdar, the majority of our staff were females. So we have now in Masdar and other companies and organizations that are focusing on renewables, women not only being part of the technical team, but also leading some of the very important projects in the UAE. I'm very happy that IRENA is doing that survey. I'm very excited about it because I'm not sure we know how many women are working in Masdar. We know how many women are working in Adwiya. We know how many women working in Diwa, etc. But we don't know how many women actually working in the solar sector itself. So I'm very excited. I think this survey that IRENA now is suggesting to do or launching is definitely an important step towards understanding where we stand as a country that has been always pioneering in gender balance and gender equality, where we stand in this important sector.
Thank you very much for sharing this very encouraging systematic empowerment of women program of the UAE. Let me turn back to Habiba. I think we lost you. There were some connectivity issues. No worries.
Funny enough, we're talking about energy, and the power in the
Exactly.
office just like went out totally. So the internet also disappeared. So I'm very
try
sorry
again.
about that.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
when we talk about the access context of women in leadership positions, and as it relates to solar PV, I would say from experience that it's really not a big difference from what you're seeing in the mainstream, leadership positions for other, let's say, sectors or regions, as it is also with the solar PV. And I will say this because one of the things that I have experienced is from time, I got into this sector, say about maybe 18 years ago, because I worked with an NGO before I founded my company. And one of the major things I found was a problem, even from then, was being treated equally. And, you're held to higher standards. And I will still also relate to Rabia's talk about being the secretary in the room. Even though you're all there attending the same event and you're still on the same table, you're always taken to be that person that is going to serve the next coffee. And, there's always this persistent gender stereotypes were systematically placed on an uneven playing ground, so we're always seen as those people. I remember that I also had this issue of being the only woman, especially in West Africa, who had started a business in renewable energies, and always being there to advocate on my own behalf, screaming for my voice to be heard. For me, it was more like, and then it was more like a challenge. And then because I was inherently a female from a part of the country where we're made to be bashful, we're meant to be reserved, you should be seen and not heard. And with the men, we're having all this ambition, and I call it bullish attitude of, a sign of strength. And I didn't have that, even though sometimes I'm the smartest person there, but I couldn't really voice it out because I was almost scared to do that. And so I couldn't trust my own voice. I have to push through a lot of external barriers and, internally. And that's what you see across a lot of sectors in when it comes to women. So being a leader and being, like championing all of these activities was kind of difficult. And one of the things I really had a big problem with was building alliances. It comes easy to men, they know how to play the game. They know how to, mix up and meet after the conference. When the conference is over, a workshop is over, I'm back in my room, talking to my children, finishing up that paperwork. And the men always just go out there and network. They try to build alliances. They try to just, make it happen. But I had that setback, and I think that has really affected my business growth I think a lot too, because I can imagine a lot of young men who just started the business in this space, in this country especially, and how far they've moved simply because they do not shy away from going out there and building alliances, and they don't have any imposter syndrome. Women, it is one of the biggest things that we have, that we are like, oh, am I supposed to be here? Should I be here? Do I feel good about being here? And I think this is also across all of the sectors. It's not about being in the solar PV business or not. So, but I think it's a bit stronger for me in this sector because, yeah, one of the only women in the beginning. At least now I'm very happy these days. I see a lot more women coming into the space. Women are owning the businesses, women are holding top positions. CEOs of some of the leading companies in Nigeria that are internationally founded, owned by are women. And so it's really like brought the pressure, and it was a bit of a pressure to try to prove yourself most times. And so now the pressure is a bit less. It's easier to be a leader, I promise you, in this space. And yes, I think in access context, it's really like, there's really not much of a difference in renewable energies or whatever sector it is.
Thank you very much for this very frank and also vivid sharing of the challenges that you faced when becoming a business leader in this field. Indeed, I think many of us can resonate to many of the things you said, and also showcasing and highlighting the importance of creating networks and not shy away from just also tell others about the great things you're doing. I would now like to turn to Monica Oliphant from Australia. She joins us late night in Australia, so we appreciate that you have another late night, Monica. And we would like to hear from you some insights into your career path, especially in solar PV, how you arrived where you are today, and also how you see the world, the working world has changed since you started your career. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you so much for the invitation to speak at this important event on International Women's Day. And thank you, Rabia, for the comprehensive overview, and Christine for the nice questions, and it's lovely to see you. I started research into solar energy about 45 years ago in 1976 at Flinders University in South Australia, constructing heat pipe absorbers in tracking solar concentrators. I came to that via a degree in physics in '61, where I was the only woman in the year with no clue what I wanted to do with my degree. And my first job was in government defence, looking into research in lasers, and again, the only woman in the team where we built one of the first lasers in Australia. Life events and a chance radio broadcast at the time of the Arab oil crisis of the early 70s, in which Nobel Prize winners suggested in passing, we might reduce chances of war if we use solar energy to prevent fighting over oil resources, led me to seek out a career in solar. Looking back, it was a very innovative recommendation at the time when virtually no solar power was being used. After solar research at Flinders Uni, I worked as a research scientist in an electricity utility in the 80s and 90s, mainly in wind and residential energy efficiency. Again, the only female physicist in the establishment. But there were 2 or 3 women engineers as well out of several hundred male professionals. And like the others, I was also thought of when I was seen as a typist, and even offered a typist uniform. While there, I managed, however, to introduce the first trials of PV in households, and was part of a team to build the first off-grid 100 kilowatt PV solar diesel power station in outback South Australia, then the largest PV array in the Southern Hemisphere. The job was project managed by one of the few female engineers, Vive Nguyen, an exceptional lady who sadly died young. However, working in a utility at a time when renewables were not really taken seriously was not easy. And sometimes I went home and shed a few tears of frustration, but never showed this emotion at work. Since the 70s, I was a member of the Australian New Zealand Solar Energy Society and then International Solar Energy Society, and I'll say a bit more about that at a later time. So when I left the utility, I was invited on a number of committees, the main one being a review of the mandatory renewable energy target, where we introduced the first incentive certificate scheme for PV in Australia, which certainly helped increase the penetration of PV, but definitely was not as effective as the feed-in tariff that started in Germany in the early 2000s. And but the feed-in tariff was announced in South Australian Parliament in 2006, introduced in 2008, and made a big difference in the state. And it was all because we had a really good Premier who took on the role of sustainability and climate change. And political support to advance renewables is essential. Since that time, I've been involved in a number of PV community power projects and patron of 3 groups on lots of committees. And I'm proud to say that I'm also involved in IRENA and GWNet, where I have met some incredibly talented women. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for sharing these really impressive insights. Maybe just a word, do you have the feeling, can you tangibly see that it has become a more gender balanced sector, or how would you, to which things would you point this to?
It is not more gender balanced, but it is getting better, which is something to be glad about, but I would like to see more women take on the role. And certainly we are not equal pay for equal work either in most of our jobs, and certainly not so many women on boards and heading companies. But there is one woman who runs a solar company in South Australia, which is not many.
Yeah, thank you. So still a long way to go, despite all the great achievements that we can be proud of. But thank you, Monica, for sharing these insights. Let me now turn to Walpurga Hemmetsberger, who is the CEO of Solar Power Europe, the voice of the solar industry in Europe, which is a central part to green recovery, and of course one of the most job-creating renewable technologies. So therefore, there are plenty of opportunities for women across the value chain, working across the value chain, as we've heard from Rabia. But still, some of these segments are more male-dominated than others, especially in higher positions. And so I would like to ask you, Walpurga, what you think companies could do on their own, or what governments could encourage them to achieve in order to get to a better gender balance at all levels, and what do you think can help level the playing field for women so that they can reach the top?
Thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction. Thanks very much for having me here today. Great to be among so many great women discussing this subject. Let me maybe just start first by saying that at least when it comes to Solar Power Europe, we have a very nice gender balance in our team. But that's probably also not very surprising. It's not mainly STEM jobs we are employing here at Solar Power Europe. So at least I'm very happy to be working in an environment where you have this inclusiveness. But indeed, at the same time, when it comes to the sector, we've seen the figures already. And by the way, I'm very grateful for reports done by IRENA, for example, and I'm looking very much forward to the Global Gender Survey you are undertaking, but also reports by you, Christine, by GWNet, which are really very helpful for bringing the topic to the surface and raising awareness. I think this is something which is very important, and that's also one of the measures which should be further encouraged by companies, but also by governments. But looking at the sector, indeed, I mean, we're doing better than other sectors, but at the same time, it's still a long way to go, also in the renewable sector and in PV in particular. And that's something I see, for example, when I look at the board, at our own board, where I started 2 years ago as a CEO of Solar Power Europe, where we had no women on our board. We now have 2. That's already an improvement. And how we did it is basically enlarging the number of board seats in order to attract, at the same time, women. And we were successful. Out of 3 additional board seats went to women. We also try to sell it as a key selling argument when we have our yearly elections for the board to increasing gender balance. So we're trying to work on that. But at the same time, it just shows that indeed the management positions in our sector are just, I mean, very few of them are run by women. And that also reflects in the end the board distribution at Solar Power Europe. And that's also something we see in our day-to-day work, for example, when it comes to organizing events. where it's always where we really take a lot of effort to have gender balance, but it takes efforts to really find the women which are in high-level positions. By the way, talking about raising awareness, what we are doing this year is we will be launching, and I'm very happy to discuss further with you, Christine, afterwards, our first Gender Balance Awards, because it is absolutely important to raising awareness. And also because in general, we need to have more jobs, as we have a very steep growing curve in our solar sector. We need to fill the jobs in general. So we are going to have a priority on raising awareness on jobs in general in the solar sector. But in particular, when we're doing this, we're also raising awareness to jobs in a very gender balanced way, and trying to encourage women to fill these jobs. So we are having a project with Google, and we will hopefully very soon launch that project. And that is really about filling jobs in our sector and filling it in a very gender balanced way. Now, getting more to your questions, Christine. What can companies and what can governments do? I think it's a lot about an inclusive workplace. It's a lot about flexibility, so that also when you have a family, you are really in a position of filling your job in a very flexible way. It's about recruitment practices, which should be a no-brainer, but sometimes is not, to really having that in a very gender balanced ways. And just because Rabia was mentioning it in the very beginning, quotas, but that's my very personal opinion. I do think that quotas are an important element, just because it will not happen, or it will not happen that quickly, actually, to have gender balance. And I think that that quotas, and that's more to governments, quotas would help in order to have more gender balance on boards. Because very often, and that's also that also has been mentioned by previous speakers already, it's very often about imposter syndrome. And if women are very much asked also to join boards, because companies need to have more women on board, I think that this also helping overcoming that imposter syndrome, and hopefully in a couple of years it doesn't exist anymore.
Thank you very much, Walburga, and congratulations to at least the 2 women on the Solar Power Europe board. I still remember the EPIA boards that were only men dominated. So I think it's also much more fun if the boards and the panels are just more balanced. So yeah, that's definitely a good step in the right direction. Let me turn to Silvia Piana from NL, and Silvia, maybe. Rabia has touched on it in her presentation. The lack of supportive workplace is an issue both in terms of retention and advancement. So what is your feeling? Do you think that the increase in remote working that we have witnessed over the last year due to the global health crisis is more of a solution or a challenge for women? And will remote working induce companies to experiment a bit more broadly with regard on how workplaces are run? What's your take on this?
This is a good question for me, because I've been remote working for a full year now, because we closed on the 5th of March, if I'm not wrong, and we're not going to open anytime soon. So we're waiting for vaccinations. Well, remote working per se is something wonderful. Not remote working, but the possibility of choosing to do it or not. In other words, the flexibility. Remote working during the pandemic was something different, because especially for women, in my case for sure, it also went along having children home for school. In Italy, at least, schools have been closed for many months, so having to take care of their family 24 hours per day. Anyway, I'm sure that the pandemic just accelerated a trend that was due to happen, in the next few years. So in this regards, at least just in this regards, the pandemic was welcome. But again, just in this regards, of course. This must go along with enabling factors from the company. At least two factors are very important. One is external and one is internal. External is investments in digitalization from the company, so making sure that all employees have the instruments, the possibility to do remote working in an efficient way. And the second one is internal, is more difficult, is a strong investment from the company in changing the cultural mindset of all the employees. And this takes years to change a cultural mindset. And again, the pandemic gave a big push to this. I think that companies should have in their values, and I'm quite lucky to work for a company that has these two values in their vision, which are responsibility and trust, which are at least the two sides of the same coin. So it's very important to work hard to make those values shared by all the people. What my company did, and I appreciated that a lot, they undertook a massive survey among all employees, and we are more than, we are slightly less than 70,000 all over the world, a massive survey called the NL that I would like to have in the future. So really asking, what do you think of flexibility? How many days per week would you like to go back to the office? 1 week per month, every Monday? There were several possibilities to be chosen. And no surprise that the vast majority of people voted for flexibility in general. Of course, it must be a structured flexibility. This is kind of an oxymoron, but cannot be just that everybody does whatever he or she wants. It must be in the interest of the company, but it has been fully demonstrated right now, and also my colleague in the panel mentioned it, that flexibility at the end of the story increases productivity, increases efficiency, so ultimately increases profits for the company. So I see nothing wrong in that. So yes, I think, just to answer to your question, that remote working was something challenging, but at the end of the story, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I think many of us will agree with you, though I think many of us wish that we come back to a bit of a new balanced, new normal. So remote is fine, but having some physical meetings would again be great to have, because I think when you have an established network, it's easy to maintain this and to exchange in a virtual space. But I think for the newcomers and the younger people, it's still quite challenging, though they are a bit more tech savvy maybe than ourselves. But probably a good mix of these is what is gonna last from this pandemic. Let me turn to Carol Weiss, co-founder of Remote Energy, which empowers solar educators and technicians worldwide. And that brings us now to the topic of education. In your experience, Carol, what is women's perspective among the solar educators and technicians you work with? Are women generally attracted to become technicians, or is society encouraging them to join your programs, or is it more a result of their own interest? What do you witness there?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be part of this panel. I agree with everything that people have said, and I've really liked the personal anecdotes that everyone has given as I relate to them. My background is as a commercial electrician and residential electrician, and I was a solar installer. That's how I entered into the solar field. And of course, on the job site, I was usually the only woman on the job site. And then as I entered into doing trainings for the workforce, I felt that I could make more impact on the trends that I was seeing in solar, to train people on solar standards of how to do good design and installation and maintenance on systems. In the classroom as well, there were not very many women showing up to technical solar classes. And so I would be a teacher in a co-ed class, and I may be the only woman in the room, or there might be 1 or 2 women. So we started women's based classes that were classes for women, taught by women. And the women showing up to the classes stated that they felt more comfortable in an all women's environment. They didn't want to be the only woman in the room trying to learn a new, how to use tools, how to install solar, etc. And so they felt more comfortable. They could leave that behind and just focus on their studies. Our women's classes are both for the purpose of training more technicians, but the secondary reason for them is to bring on more women trainers. What I see a huge lack of is that there are not as many women in roles of in technical departments. Because if you think about solar trades jobs, that would be mainly being taught in technical schools that are training electricians. And when you look at the departments of those technical schools, it's largely male professors and teachers. And so, so in the Train the Trainers programs that I was doing through VOTEC, it was in multiple countries. A lot of times I was the only woman in the room until they decided to do women's only classes. And in that case, when women came to the classes, they were technical trainers, and a lot of times they were meeting other technical trainers for the first time because they were the only woman from their department. And so the networking in that case is really big. You know, and a story I like to tell, because I used to think that, well, so a story I like to tell is when I went to, we helped a technical school in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, bring a solar program on that was a year program. And they were able to get scholarships for half of the students to be women. And, you know, we were thrilled about this. The 6 teachers that we trained there were all men, but they were great people. And so I thought this was going to work beautifully, etc. And for the large part, it did. When I went down about a month into the program, I spoke to the class and with 4 of my other male colleagues. And what happened in the question and answer is that one by one, every woman stood up and asked a question to Madame Carroll. And they would say, you know, they'd stand up and say, this is a question from Madame Carroll. We've never seen a female electrician before. You know, why did you choose this career and do you like it? The next woman stood up, this is from Madame Carroll. People in our country do not think that we can do the work as a woman. I don't believe them. What do you say to that? You know, this is a question from Madame Carroll. We don't think anyone will hire us as women. So, you know, what do you think we should do about that? And it went on and on and on. And my colleagues and I were looking at each other going, what is happening right now? And at the end, you know, I actually interviewed the women the next day, and they had never seen a woman in front of the room as the teacher, as the mentor. And that really changed our direction as an organization at Remote Energy to focus on making sure that there's women in front of the room, so that they are carving out a spot for the young women that are deciding, are they going to go into this degree program? Are they going to, is this a career choice for them? That we want to have women placed in the front so that they're helping those other women make that choice. And so I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I think you point to something really important, the importance of having role models, and which should not be underestimated, and also the importance of mentorship. We at GWNet, we also witnessed this and have launched several programs, and I'm also proud to say that we launched a series of programs, mentoring programs for a series of countries today at International Women's Day, because we just see that sometimes younger women need a bit of more encouragement, and when they see and can follow the example of women having developed a successful career in this sector, this is incredibly powerful. So I absolutely agree. And now I would like to turn, last but not least, to Virginia Schneider, from the Inter-American Development Bank. Virginia, you are a senior energy specialist for infrastructure and infrastructure in the energy sector, working on program and policy issues across Latin America and the Caribbean. But your core experience is actually in solar PV. So I would like to know from you, what would you say are the main challenges facing women in the solar PV sector at all levels in Latin America and the Caribbean, and whether you think that these challenges vary across regions, or does it depend on the level at which someone is working? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction, and thank you very much, Irina, for the invitation, and Rabia for the wonderful presentation. It's great to be in this panel and be part of this event today. Thank you very much. So what we saw in Ravi's presentation is pretty much the same reality in Latin America and the Caribbean. Women across our region have the same barriers. You know, we still have the perception of gender roles, as Carol just mentioned. Cultural and social norms are still an issue. And then we still have prevailing hiring practices in the region, you know, old-fashioned systems of how we hire people. And also, I think it's important to mention that it's related to solar, and the pandemic has highlighted the main issues that we have in the energy sector. So the situation amplified the problems that we have in terms of low quality services, faulty maintenance, obsolete rate settings, management systems, informality in the sector, high logistical costs for our productive sector. So, and also we still have that only 2 women out of 10 are working in the energy sector in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the reason why I mentioned what happened with COVID and how very few women we have in the sector is because closing the gaps in the gender and the energy sector in terms of gender is gonna require governments to change the chip and to shift towards sustainable energy that will provide opportunities to tackle this gender problem and will open up for women to join the sector. So really, I think we are all facing the same issues across the sector. I think in Latin America and the Caribbean, perhaps throughout the solar value chain, there may be less opportunities than in other regions, because if we think of the solar value chain, we have research and development, we have manufacturing, we have all the distribution systems, we have trainers, we have policymakers. And in Latin America and the Caribbean, sometimes there are sectors that are not, the region is not really investing, such as there's not a lot of investment in research and development. There's not a lot of investment in manufacturing because it's not coming from within the region. And we still have a low number of women joining the STEM, so studying science and technology. The number still is very low compared to the number of men that are going to college and universities and graduating from that. So definitely a lot of work ahead of us in the region. We are at least at the IDB side, and I know many multilaterals are doing the same, making sure that at least in our investments, loans and technical cooperations, we are including gender actions that are clear, that are concrete. For instance, in training, when we provide training for women, for the sector, we want to make sure that at least 50% of the people that are going to take the training are going to be women. And also we want to make sure that the companies are also taking action in implementing action and gender plans, because it's the only way to move forward on this, to make it that every little action we take, from the smallest investment loan, grant, or technical cooperation, that we include gender actions. But I leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Yeah, indeed, a very important point to put the gender lens on all the financing that you grant. That's indeed very important. Well, I think you see already with the wealth of information and also personal experiences, we could go on for a very long time here at this panel. And I understand also that there might be some questions by the audience. We have over 150 people watching us live, but I was asked by IRENA to share with you that any questions could also be sent to gender@irena.org, and we'll make sure that they are also getting answered. And now we have another 10 minutes before the end of the panel, so I will like to use this for asking a question to all of you. And please, whoever feels ready, go and give your answer. what piece of advice would you give to either your younger self? I think it's a very nice idea to think of us being 20 years younger, and also for all the ladies listening to us who are ready to pursue their careers. What do you think are just the most important issues they should focus on? So whoever wants to take the floor, please go ahead. Yes, please, Naval.
I would say and it's an advice I always give it to people, myself, starting with myself and everybody around me. Every contact leaves a trace. This is something I learned very early in forensics, and it's very important for us to be extremely selective of the people that we choose to surround ourselves by. So, you have your family, but your network and your contacts are extremely, extremely, extremely important. And as human beings, we are the average of the people around us. So be very selective. It's very important. Where you are going to be in the next 20 years is going to depend on what type of people you surrounded yourself with when you were much younger.
Thank you very much. Every contact leaves a trace. Walpurga, you're all so quick that I'm not sure that I point exactly in the right order to you, but please go ahead.
I couldn't agree more. Now, well, every contact leaves a trace, and networking is very important. But that very much links to one thing which I think is decisive: to leave behind your imposter syndrome, because that sometimes doesn't make you feel that you should get in contact with people, the right people. And for me, that is really one advice I would like to give, because I also see it in my surroundings, when talking to young women, that this is still one of the major issues we're facing as women, that we're not believing in ourselves. And I think that should be left behind us. And maybe just a second thing, you shouldn't let yourself guide by social and cultural norms. And that is something I would tell my younger self. When I thought I will have a family, and I thought at some point that I need to plan my career according to what I'm planning family-wise, which sometimes, doesn't materialize or whatever. So you really should just follow your feelings when it comes, or your gut feeling when it comes to what you would like to do, and what the kind of career is you would like to pursue, and just follow that path. And everything else, will just be getting solved on the way going on.
Thank you. Follow your gut feeling. Monica.
Thank you. Well, for me, I think do work experience in your chosen field to make sure it's what you want to do. If you find out it's not, that's really worth knowing as well. Get a mentor, hopefully through GWNet, someone who preferably has had experience in the field you want to go into, and who can direct you to useful networks and explain pitfalls and benefits. It sure would have helped me if I would have had a mentor. And if possible, choose a project or field that is not overcrowded, so that you can make your mark more readily in emerging areas and in areas you believe passionately in. And don't expect it to be easy. Many failures occur before a success. Stick at it if you see the end game to be worthwhile. And that's my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Monica. Be passionate about what you do, and then also stick to it. Habiba, please. I see you raising the hand, and then Virginia.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited because if I had to talk to my younger self, I would say be bolder. And maybe that follows on to Walburga's thing about being, shedding the cultural norms and all of that, because if you put it in front of you that what you're doing is actually for the global good, then you should actually strengthen your own self and be bold and take those steps that nobody expects that a woman will take. Be bold, just step out there, do what you can, and enrich yourself. I would have told myself, enrich myself better in this space, and then, be more active in delivering my responsibilities.
Thank you. Be bolder. Virginia.
Yes, I agree with everything that has been shared, and I definitely don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be shy. I didn't think that solar was an opportunity for me, you know, kind of later on in my career. So make sure you do a lot of research, because many times for women, not all the options are on the table. Like nobody told you like, hey, this exists, you could do this. So talk to people, don't be shy. Really, when you, if you don't do it, you lose the ability to get and gain a lot of you know, opportunities. And the other thing I will say is like also just stop worrying about what others may think. Be brave and just work hard.
Thank you, Virginia. Silvia? And then Carol.
I was impressed by Abiba's words at the beginning. She said that she couldn't trust her own voice. So let me also talk again, as Walburga already did, about self-sabotage. We have to definitely avoid self-sabotage. So if somebody recognizes your worth and your first thought is, I don't deserve it, that's not true, think again, please. This is very important. I reached this awareness after the age of 40, but it's never too late. And I would like to encourage younger ladies, younger women to reach it sooner.
Thank you. Carol, please.
Well, mine is very teacher oriented. To make sure you ask all of your questions, that they are good questions. What I notice when I teach co-ed classes, which are mainly male, people are very shy to ask their questions because they don't want to look like they don't know what's going on. In women's classes, you know, every question that they've had their whole lives comes up. and I love that. And those are good questions. And you shouldn't think that because other people aren't asking questions in the room that they actually know what's going on, that you're probably going to enlighten them as well by your questions.
Thank you. Well, it feels a bit like, you know, we have lots of speakers from lots of different backgrounds and really precious pieces of advice we had. I would like to thank you all for sharing your insights, for also having shared them with a personal touch. I think this is always very refreshing and probably inspiring for many of people participating. And I would also like to thank you for being so disciplined when it comes to time and for making my life as a moderator quite easy in handling this panel. I would like also to thank IRENA, particularly Celia, for this great preparation, and hand over the floor to Rabia for the concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, ladies, for your participation. It was great to listen to all of you. Thank you, Christine, for moderating. It's never a very easy job to have, but you always do it so greatly. Maybe I'll answer the same question to conclude, because I think I have a double imposter syndrome, one as a woman and one as a PhD holder. So I think that it does lead you to some sort of self-sabotage or constant self-doubt. But at the same time, there's something I like about it, because it gives you, I think, greater humility, and it also makes you work harder. And I think in that light, it helps you defy culture and social norms by the mere fact that you become really good at what you do. And I think a lot of women are very, very good at what they do. So with that, from IRENA's side, I'd like to thank you all again, and I hope you can share this survey with us, with all of your networks, so that we can have enough data. As you know, it's really, we're missing so much data on this subject, and hopefully we will be able to have a nice report thanks to all of you. So again, on IRENA's side, thank you very much for participating, and we hope to see you soon again on such a nice topic. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.